Tomorrow is 26th July, the 21st anniversary of the end of the Kargil war between India and Pakistan. You've heard enough of bravery, sacrifice, and exploits of the valorous Indian soldiers during the summer of 1999 when they evicted intruders from Pakistan at the heights of Kargil, Dras, and Batalik. But this time, on Simply Nitin, I'm going to speak about developments post the Kargil war and how many reforms were brought in to the national security architecture. I'm Nitin Gokhale. So 21 summers ago, India and Pakistan fought a major conflict short of a war in Kargil, which is very well known to the millennials. In fact, when we talk about wars fought by India, most people born either in 1999 or in the new 21st century, most will recognize Kargil as the war. But of course, there have been many other wars that India has fought in 1947, 1962, 1965, 1971. During each of these wars, there was enough bravery to be proud of. I'm sure most of you have heard of Captain Vikram Batra, Captain Manoj Pandey, Sanjay Kumar, Yogendra Yadav, all Paramveer Chakra winners. Paramveer Chakra, mind you, is the highest gallantry award awarded by the Indian Army to its soldiers who fight during the war. Of course, there is another anecdote that many of you may miss, and I want to draw your attention to it. And that is, one young Lieutenant Colonel who led 13 Jammu and Kashmir Rifles unit during Kargil is today the Northern Army commander. Then Lieutenant Colonel Y.K. Joshi is today Lieutenant General Y.K. Joshi and leading India's fight on the line of actual control with China in Ladakh. For the past 3 months, you may have seen his photographs, you may have heard his name or read his name in the newspapers. He is the man who is leading India's fight back against China and the perfidy that China has undertaken in Ladakh. But that's one part of Kargil. Post the Kargil war, which ended on 26 July, many changes were triggered in the national security architecture. And that's something that I'm going to concentrate upon in this episode of Simply Nitin. Every crisis brings an opportunity. Now, if you look back, post 1962, and I spoke about this in the previous episode, where Indian and American intelligence operatives started a new cooperation. Couple of new organizations were raised and formed post 1962. The Aviation Research Center and the Special Frontier Force were raised in the immediate wake of the 1962 military debacle. Then came 1965, where it was found that India did not have enough intelligence or timely intelligence. So, the RNAW, the Research and Analysis Wing, India's foreign intelligence agency, was formed in 1968. Post Kargil, several other changes were brought in. If you look back, the government decided to form the Kargil Review Committee under the chairmanship of K. Subramaniam, father of the current External Affairs Minister, Subramaniam Jaishankar. Under Mr. Subramaniam's leadership, the Kargil Review Committee examined all the shortcomings, the shortfalls, the lapses, the mistakes, and of course strengths of the Indian military, and came up with a set of recommendations, which were then submitted to the government. And in April 2000, the government set up a group of ministers to look at the recommendations and then implement them. The group of ministers, instead of deciding themselves on what the implementation roadmap should be, decided to form 4 task forces. They were divided in 4 domains: intelligence, internal security, border management, and defense. These task forces had members drawn from each of the specialized domain or field, and they worked for almost 8 months talking to different people and coming up with a set of recommendations, which were then accepted by the government, by the Cabinet Committee on Security, India's highest security decision making body, in April 2001. What did it consist of? It had several recommendations which led to creation of multiple organizations and changes in the way intelligence is collected, collated, analyzed. One of the major reforms was to establish what is called a multi-agency center, where all intelligence agencies would give inputs to the multi-agency center, which will then be analyzed by people sitting there, and then one consolidated view would be given to the decision makers. The multi-agency center was fed by what is called subsidiary multi-agency centers spread across the country. After so many years, I can say from information drawn from open source that there are 400 plus subsidiary multi-agency centers spread across the country, which collect information, which process information and then give it to the multi-agency center in Delhi, which in turn collates, analyzes, comes up with assessments which are then presented to the National Security Council Secretariat, which itself is a product of the reforms undertaken post-Kargil. So that's the second reform. The third was the GOM recommended establishment of an intelligence coordination group and a technical coordination group. They also established a National Technical Facilities Organization, which today we know as NTRO, or the National Technical Research Organization, which collects, assesses, interprets technical intelligence. That means satellites, electronic intelligence, all that is the responsibility of the NTRO. This is product of the reforms undertaken post-Kargil. The establishment of the Economic Intelligence Unit, the Financial Intelligence Unit and the Defense Intelligence Agency, which is under the MOD, and the Financial and the Economic Intelligence Units are under the Ministry of Finance. So the Economic Intelligence Unit and the Financial Intelligence Unit were formed to monitor currency flow linked to organized crime or terrorism. And the Financial Intelligence Unit in fact represents India in the Financial Action Task Force, which all of you will remember in recent years has been trying to blacklist Pakistan for its activities supporting terrorism worldwide. That is how the changes or reforms were brought in the intelligence setup, not just in defense, not just in intelligence agencies, but also in the finance ministry. Apart from that, the NSA's office, or the Office of the National Security Advisor, was consolidated after the GOM report was accepted by the CCS. The National Security Advisor now became the fulcrum around which the national security architecture revolves. All of you know that there are further changes that have happened in the past 2 years in the national security architecture. I had done some programs in the year 2019, but I'll talk about that in a different episode maybe. But what I wanted to bring to your notice in this episode was that crisis in 1999, the Kargil crisis or the Kargil conflict, brought about fundamental changes in the way India decides to operate, or India operates and functions in the national security space. The other change that came in was to designate different central armed police forces for different roles. So the one border, one police force policy also was articulated in that set of reforms. So, for instance, the ITBP, the Indo-Tibetan Border Police, is actually doing its role as it ought to have done right from the beginning, to be the first line of defense along the line of actual control with China. The BSF looks after the Bangladesh and the Punjab border or the Pakistan border. They are the border guarding force. The CRPF, by the way, is now the primary counter-insurgency force in the country. So if there is a law and order situation or there is insurgency like in Kashmir, the CRPF will be the first one to move and take on either the Naxal insurgency or the Kashmir insurgency or the Northeast insurgency. So designations were given to different forces. The SSB was told to look after the borders with Bhutan and Nepal. All this is a set of reforms that were unveiled post-Kargil, and it took about 3 or 4 years to start implementing them. So the bottom line here is that every crisis brings an opportunity. The question here is, currently we are going through a crisis with China on the line of actual control in Ladakh. Are there some shortcomings there? Certainly. There will be an assessment done, there will be a post-mortem done after the crisis is over, whenever it is over, and then hopefully there will be some changes coming in to the national security architecture, or some tweaking and some fine-tuning of the national security architecture will take place in coming years. But this is how governments evolve their policy, and that's something that I wanted to bring to your notice. Until the next time, do keep liking us on our social media platforms, keep sending feedback, write to us with your comments, and I will take up some of those suggestions for the next episode of Simply Nitin. But until the next time, it's goodbye.